Hello everyone, my name is Spencer Eckhaus, and today I'd like to share my experience on the March of the Living and how the trip so strongly connected me to my family's story during the Holocaust. First, I want to say what an incredible, life-changing experience the March was. It is a journey that I will always cherish and never forget. As the great-grandson of 4 Holocaust survivors, 3 of which were imprisoned in Auschwitz, and 1 who was on Schindler's List, I felt a deep responsibility to take part in the march. Now, I can say that no matter how much I prepared, I could have never predicted just how impactful this trip would be. On the second day of our trip, we visited Auschwitz-Birkenau, the place where my Zadie's parents were imprisoned and where his sister was murdered. As we walked through Birkenau, I pictured the stories my Zadie has told me about his parents. We arrived at the selection point, the exact spot where an SS guard would decide the fate of millions of Jews with just the flick of a finger. It was there that I shared the story of what would have been my great-aunt Dorothy, and it was at that spot that she was sent to her death at the age of 1. Telling her story where it actually happened gave her memory power, and it gave a baby who couldn't even speak yet a voice. Later that day, on Erev Yom HaShoah, we visited the Temple Shul in Krakow, the city where my grandmother and her family are from. That shul in particular is very important to me and my family because it is where my great-grandparents were married nearly 90 years ago. I had the profound honor of telling the story of my grandmother's parents to our trip to Coast, to the Toronto adult trip, and to the Swedish contingency. I couldn't believe that I was telling the story in the very space where their lives were once filled with so much joy and hope. It was one of the most meaningful and unforgettable experiences of my entire life. The next morning, while the rest of the group visited Ghetto Square, I was grateful to be granted a request to visit the Ploshchov concentration camp with the adult guide David and the March of the Living chairman Brian. Ploshchov is where both my grandmother's parents were imprisoned. I heard so many stories about Ploshchov, especially from the Spielberg Shoah video of my great-grandmother, who was a seamstress for the camp's commandant, Eamon Goth. My grandfather was on Schindler's List through his friend Yitzhak Stern, who was played by Ben Kingsley in the film. Hearing these stories is one thing, but seeing it in person with my own eyes and standing in the very spot where it occurred, it was surreal. I expected Ploshchov to be solemn, well-preserved, almost like a museum. But what I found was a few grassy hills, a dog walking trail, and a couple of signs. It is now a functioning urban park with joggers, dog walkers, and people out for a stroll. How could there be no trace of the horror and suffering that occurred there? How could a centuries-old Jewish community with its vibrant culture and even a massive cemetery located on those very grounds be so easily erased? That's when I realized history is fragile, memories can fade, facts get omitted. We are seeing it today on the streets of Toronto and the rest of the world. History is being distorted to vilify and target Jews, and that is why we must not only remember, we must act. We must stand up against anti-Semitism wherever it exists. We must educate others by sharing these stories and making sure the next generation knows what happened. That is why being here today on International Holocaust Survivors Day is so important. And we must protect the state of Israel, the homeland for the Jewish people, as a living and thriving testament to the Jewish people's resilience, dignity, and hope, and as a reminder that we have survived and we will always survive.